I came here in the summer to write, and most of the poems I wrote here were walking pieces. I set myself all sorts of projects to do. For instance, walking along the side of the river here for 5 miles and trying to write a poem which replicated every stop where the walking and the gait that I used was replicated within the syntax. I then decided, having looked at the river and decided it was warm enough, to write a poem based upon swimming. So I didn't jump in here in the Strid, but I did actually jump in into the water just down there, and I swam the wharf. And I tried to write a poem which replicated and enacted the rhythms of swimming in a river. And so this is the poem that I came up with. When I was in the river, I became incredibly aware, not so much of the water, but of the proximity of these trees and the relationship between the water and the trees, the fact that everything that's going through the trees is really coming from the river. And that when there's a big storm, a lot of these trees end up in the river and become part of it. So I decided to try to write a poem which really questioned and explored that relationship between the wharf itself and the oaks that we see around us, and Strid and Sessile is the result. I tried to just take little elements of each. In the case of the river, it was things like the river being an arc or a brook or a wake, it being a result of, say, the rain, and the different components of a stream too, such as the spring, the becks that feed it, the rivers that feed it, and finally the Strid itself. With the tree, the elements of the trees that I was taking included things like the idea of the oak key. You've probably come across this, that when oaks produce these seeds, they're called keys, and sycamores have them too, sycamore keys. Trying to wrap these two things together, this is the poem that came out. And then taking it one step further, how can you turn a poem into a river itself? Well, swimming it helped to write it. I looked at a map of the wharf. I looked at a map of the wharf from just the bridge, which was 2 miles upstream there, to the Strid here, and tried to replicate the pattern of the poem by the topology of the river. And so the shape of the poem came out like this. This is geographically exactly the wharf between Barden Bridge and the Strid. And the way the poem moves syntactically and rhythmically was trying to replicate the rhythm and the speed of the river. Strid and Sessile. As river is to this tree, so the oak's key, so the bark's arc, so the bark's brook, so the bark's wakes, so the roots wades, so the roots spate, so the roots race, so the roots wells, so the trunk's prow, so the trunk's oar, so the trunk's mast, so the trunk's wall, so the branches wave, so the branches becks, so the branches rills, so the branches tides, so the leaf's flood, so the leaf's shoals, so the leaf's skiffs, so the leaf's shore, and so the waters roar. As tree is to this river, so the wharf's weather, so the rain's seed, so the rain's bud, so the rain's bloom, so the spring's root, so the spring's shoot, so the spring's stock, so the spring's stems, so the beck's spray, so the beck's sprigs, so the beck's break, so the beck's branch, so the river's boughs, so the river's vines, so the river's fronds, so the river's palms, so the Strid's wall, so the Strid's warp, so the Strid's sporing, so the Strid's roaring, and so hove to the oak's shore.